So glad I went through all that.
Yeah. And we thought Cheryl was you're like the only person.
Okay, it is 12:02.
I make a motion for approval of the minutes from the February 23rd, 2022 meeting.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion or correction? Okay. Not heard. All in favor?
Aye. Abstain.
Okay, one abstention. And any nays? Okay, so the minutes are approved as written.
So would you like me to introduce?
Yes.
All right, so we have a guest today, George Krivda. George is here. He has worked with the towns of East Windsor and Somers, maybe some others that I'm not sure aware of, on their small business and nonprofit organization grants for the American Rescue Plan. And we had sent him some questions. We sent those around. And but in the meantime, we might want to start off with, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you did for East Windsor and Somers, and if you've worked anywhere else.
Well, certainly. Did everyone have a chance to see my resume?
Yeah.
I forwarded that.
Yeah.
So that.
And I saw your answers too. Thank you for the responses.
That, I would say the resume just details my life's work moving through the legislature and through the Department of Agriculture and USDA, et cetera. And one of the gentlemen I worked with at the State Department of Agriculture was Jason Bauza, who then got elected for selectman. He and I worked on a very extensive program together dealing with grants for farmers. After the state was hit by a bad tornado, Governor Malloy tasked the department with designing a $5 million grant program. We started from scratch with no template, developing questions, and then we spent an entire summer around a table about this size that was stacked with applications, going through them together, reasoning our justification for giving them taxpayer money. And time went on. I went to USDA. He took over the State Department of Agriculture as the chief of staff after I left. And he subsequently was elected. ARPA funds came about. He had the brainstorm that he would like to do a similar type of program. And under ARPA, so when you look at the interim final rule, which is in place until April 1st, and then the final rule takes over, there are many roads, avenues, a town, municipality, government, state government, tribal government, many avenues that can be accessed through this document. What I do is a very small, narrow part of it, which is grants to businesses and nonprofits. The rationale and reasoning, so the process is that under ARPA, an entity is entitled for compensation for damages caused by or exacerbated by, that's a big word because that opens things much wider, and they are entitled to compensation for that. Once they receive that compensation through a grant program, they don't need to spend the money on what the damages were. So the thought was that a business knows what it's facing at the moment. So examples might be a restaurant knocked out. First of all, they were closed, mandatory, and those expenses that they had while they were closed, their rent, their insurances are all reimbursable. Then they knocked out a wall and put in a quick delivery process. All the expenses to do that would then become reimbursable. When they were shut down, the revenue that they lost is reimbursable. And then you arrive at a number set by the town as to how great of a grant you wish to give, how much money you have. Both of the two towns I'm working with have done a $10,000 grant. When you
As the max, you mean?
Yes, as the max. When you but that's totally,
Understood.
that could be changed.
Understood.
The process is to, in my mind, arrive at that number the quickest, most direct way that is demonstrable as damage. There's a lot of fuzzy language that lets towns go beyond that. You can award money for financial health of a business. Well, how do you measure the financial health of a business? They don't have any money today, but do you know if the owner went to the casino last week? I mean, how do you determine such a thing? I don't think they can actually ever, with what they've given everyone to work with, I don't really anticipate a lot of people being audited or having problems because the language is so broad. But if you take the money and issue false invoices and then go to the casino, well, yeah. But there's so much in this. If the money travels to a business or to a nonprofit, as long as it's legit, and you can show the damages, I don't think the town needs to be concerned with that audit. Now, bigger audit of the town dealing with every dime of the funds, and this might be part of, like, okay, what did you do over here? But I doubt very seriously anyone picks on that program.
Not to derail this at all, but are you familiar with the standard allowance language that's been put out there for the 10 million and under?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, then, go ahead.
But is that something I should be, aware of?
Well,
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, so my layman's understanding, and I don't want this to be the topic of discussion,
Well,
but
it's important.
is that if municipalities have less than $10 million in award, the municipalities can elect, I believe the term is standard allowance, which would allow them to basically call all of these distributions, classify all of these distributions as, what's the word?
Government service.
Government service.
Government service, and it was under the term revenue law.
And they do not have to any longer have to show that the town lost up to that $10 million. They can just use that, they can identify where they want the funds to go. They can, I don't want to say dole, but they can grant the awards per their discretion. And my layman's understanding is it greatly reduces the follow-up reporting requirements.
Yes, as evidenced by, there's a
We
piece
talked
of...
about that, but just what Nicole sent us last week, and
Yeah.
you've probably seen the updates on the compliance. There's what we have to do to recommend an allowance, what the Board of Selectmen has to do, and there's what the finance group has to do in their reporting. So they're related, but they're different.
The only reason I ask that is because it does inform us as far as there's a big difference between turning over 1,000 recommendations to a Board of Finance versus 10 recommendations to a Board of Finance or a Board of Select People, right? Because it's just untenable to be able to expect them to follow up on that on the larger number. So anyways, go ahead.
So I believe the way that was dealt with the town, so there's a contract that recipients of the funds sign with the town. And in that contract, it's an affidavit, and they swear that what they're saying is the truth.
That's what East Windsor did.
Yes, and that's what Summers will do as well.
And then the other ones I've looked at also have something similar to that. And that's usually, the attestation occurs at application.
At the delivery of
Well,
the
at
check.
application and again at delivery of the funds.
So that made the town feel that in terms of any problems coming down the pike, the individual, if they did not tell the truth. In terms of like whether, so there might be 100 grants in a program like this or more.
Thank you.
And, you know, a committee like this, so I would imagine if I were to make a recommendation, I would say a subcommittee should be formed of this committee to review. I'll pass around a document that isn't really a public document, but there's an application, and then I do a tally sheet from the application outlining which, and it's not just automatic transferal. I'm reviewing it saying, that doesn't look like that. That person misunderstood what I was saying, and I go through, but then say the number is 5,000, and before we get to any of those tricky numbers, I learn that they did $2,000 for PPE, $2,000 for physical plant changes, and another $2,000 for something else. Well, that hit your 5,000 numbers, so all the other numbers no longer become a problem. So there's no follow-up, you don't need to do it, you hit your number, you demonstrated your loss. Now the process is, it would go before a subcommittee, I would make a presentation item by item, or there might only be some questions. The subcommittee might say, we agree with 80% of what you said, but these last 4 we want to talk about.
The idea being we have an underwritten file that we then make our decision on.
Right.
And then upon which the Board of Selectmen can now say, we have a foundation to make.
And they make a one vote to accept the committee's.
It was the thinking of doing businesses and nonprofits that other areas, let's say mental health or let's say emergency services, were more easily documented without an underwritten file. Is that what the thinking of these towns has been, by hiring you for just the business and the?
Well, just that the town certainly could do this. They don't need a consultant to do it.
Oh, no.
I'm just saying that
maybe I didn't state it properly. Did the towns also concurrently, do you know, make grants to non-business and non-nonprofit?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
They're spending money on schools. Okay. They're spending money on, I know Windsor, part of that, their money is going to extend a water pipe that'll bring.
A committee could engage you for the nonprofit and business application aspect.
That's all I do.
Understood.
Do they hire other consultants for other areas?
I believe they have ongoing relationships with folks that have to do with school construction and building. You know, the town isn't going to put in a big water pipe. They're going to hire a construction firm to do that, and they have their own relationships and bidding process, but the funding for it now is there as opposed through.
So a committee like ours could say, all right, we're going to allocate X% toward business and nonprofits. We now have an underwriting process.
Yes.
Through George. And we then focus as a committee on I'll call it the underwriting process for the non-areas that have to show documentation of lost revenues and the like. We're not going to show lost documentation for mental health services. We're not going to show lost revenue for mental health services. We're not going to show lost revenue even necessarily for emergency services. However, there are additional expenses that we could easily get from the town.
May I interrupt for a second? One of the points Martha talked about was an entity that was looking for money to buy an ambulance.
Yes.
Ambulance. So that is probably set up as a 501c3, so it is a nonprofit and would be eligible to apply under this side of it, not emergency government services side.
Right.
And then I would ask them what extra costs they had. So you know off the bat, they were making unbelievable amount of runs. They were bringing people to everything went off the charts for them. So all their supplies numbers went up. They had to get disposable PPE. So tick, 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 till you come up to a number. Now they get their award, and they look around and say, how best are we going to serve the community with this money? And one of those things is an ambulance stretcher. And so that could be done under this part of your big picture. So the grants part of this is perhaps, I mean, you have roughly $2 million. You need to determine what percentage, and then from there you would determine what size of the grant. And then if you went over that amount, rather than put more money into the program, you would then reduce the grants proportionally.
Okay,
Question.
great idea.
So a question for you would be that we could develop ours to say, I'm just going to make a number, but say we're going to give 20 grants to small businesses not to exceed 10,000, but for nonprofits, we might say our grant would be more, say 50,000, and we're going to do 10 of those. I mean, that we're looking at.
So one of the, this is going to sound funny, but believe me, giving away money is not easy.
Yeah, no, it
That's why
doesn't.
you're here.
We already know that. We don't even have an application.
You didn't need a consultant to tell you that. So
Especially taxpayer money.
yeah, so in order to not have any kind of acrimony in the community as you're doing this, everything must be crystal clear, transparent, and fair across the board. I don't think you want any losers. You don't want someone to fill out all this application and be number 11 after you had their first 10.
Okay.
So I think the answer to make sure that no one walks away from the process aggrieved is to say, if we go over this amount, if the number of applications are way more than we could have ever expected, we want everybody to get a piece of it.
Okay.
Not just these chosen ones, because then the natural reaction is when you're not the chosen one is, well, why not? How did I not make that cut? You know, I do this and I do that, and then there's bad talk around and a bad vibe. And everyone that is entitled under the program should get, in my opinion, should get a piece of what the town is willing to give to the community.
In your towns, did they know what the cap was when they applied? Was
Yes,
it clear?
it's $10,000 cap, but in both cases, the town reserved the right to reduce the awards proportionally based on the number of applications.
So it was a straight award. They weren't like tallying, I need $6,852, and they got 6,000 instead of 10,000.
No, yes, they were, but after you, if I heard you straight, after they reached the $6,000, you know, if the award was $10,000 and they agreed their loss, then it was $16,000. Once they ticked off all the boxes and made the 10
I'm
grand.
saying, what if it's under 10 grand?
What if it's-
So I was instructed by the town to help people get to that $10,000 number. If someone asked for $6,200 and I went through their award and they were entitled to more than $6,200, I gave them what they were entitled to. Well, I made the recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. They made the decision to do that. And,
They didn't run out of money?
well, so they did.
Yeah.
And then, so East Windsor put $1 million into the pot.
Of how much?
How much?
They ended up, so then they went over the $1 million mark, and the question was, would they reduce it proportionally or would they add to it? Because they still had money that they hadn't accounted for. And they chose to add money into it. So they ended up spending, I think, something like $1.17 million.
So they took money out from the municipal piece and put it into the non.
So it was all
Pot, just the big pot.
The town was given
Okay.
this
X
$2
amount,
million,
go do it.
and they're gonna spend it how they
Go
were
do
going
it
to.
the way you want. But what I'm saying is, when you were done with the process, you capped them at $10,000.
Yes.
And.
No one ever got more than 10.
Right, but it.
10% of them got less than 10 because they had less than $10,000 worth of damages.
Okay, so, but most of them got $10,000, and the number of applicants exceeded the number that was allotted. And the town chose on its own to throw another $1 million of their ARPA money?
Another $117,000.
Okay, of ARPA money?
ARPA, yeah, it was the same
all
kind of
ARPA,
money.
they just shifted it from one-
They hadn't accounted for a portion of how they.
Hadn't spent some of their money.
So
Okay.
keep in mind that the business grants in East Windsor were early in the process.
Right,
They
they were
hadn't
done.
allocated out all the other monies yet, so
Okay.
they could go back to the till, so to speak.
Yeah, but the way to handle that is just to dedicate a certain amount of money, period. So you would,
When you're out, you're out.
so you would say, just gonna toss a number out, you're gonna put $200,000 into grants. You're going to limit the grants to $5,000 each. And then, you're gonna put aside X number of dollars for what you think it will cost for me, for, all the administration part of it, which includes like $500 at the end, making nice reports that you pass out everywhere, because that's important to justify how you spent this money, that everyone can read. I'm sorry, I wish I had brought.
We looked at
the
it
report.
online.
You did?
Did you give the nonprofits the same as the businesses cap, 10,000?
Yes.
It was the same for both.
Yeah, because that would start the same argument you
Same,
discussed
yeah,
earlier.
agreed.
Well, how come we don't get that?
Right.
And let me just tell you my experience. When you go through these stories, you come to realize that most of these businesses, you're going to give them 10,000, say, tops. They lost 75,000.
Right.
They are,
Right.
the numbers, you can almost certainly count that anyone who asks for $10,000 deserves far more.
Yeah.
And when you see something, a little tiny shop that's open 2 days a week, and, they say they need 6,000, it's probably around that.
Yeah.
Because that's the nature of it. But, you have an electrical contracting business, you have a restaurant, you have any kind of a business going, devastated by what happened. But what you learn is how innovative and how unbelievably responsive. It made me so proud reading this, that the Connecticut Yankee spirit is still alive, that you have these little businesses that said, I spent 15 years building this business, I'm not losing it to this,
Stupid.
so I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And the challenge is now doing the ciphering. Okay, so you put in an outdoor patio. How much was that? Well, I did it with my brother-in-law over the weekend. Well, you may have, but
Even if they were in business, they would have done it with their brother-in-law.
you bought slate, you bought sand, you bought tables and chairs.
Right.
You didn't do that before. It was directly a result of this. And how many hours? You're entitled to an hourly wait for, so very quickly you get to 10,000 when somebody did something like that.
So can I ask a bigger picture question, like
Sure.
a bird's eye picture? The advantage of a consultant for us as a town would be you're doing the actual work, the physical work of doing all this, and it's an air of somebody from the outside vetting, right? Is there any other?
Yep. So I would be the structure I would suggest is, and by the way, I don't know how your process moves through this town. Somers has a convoluted process of who has to okay these funds.
It's familiar.
Ours has
All
more
right.
twists and turns than that.
So, but all along the way, you need to satisfy everyone. You don't leave any unanswered questions or any unhappy people. And there might be something that you would say to me, you know what, George? We really want to give this guy some money. Can you find the language within this 430-page ponderous document that justifies it? That's what you pay me to do. Rather than, anyone can do it. You can always decide as a committee that you're going to do all the work that I would do, and you're going to divvy it up, and you don't have to pay a consultant at all. And I'm not saying that.
How large?
I'm saying that as a concerned taxpayer.
Understood. No, and it's appreciated. How large was East Windsor's total ARPA fund, pool, do you remember?
I think it was like 2.4 million.
Okay, and do you know how many hours do you think you had with And understand it would be probably less for the similar sized program today.
I billed them $25,700 at $120 an hour. So however many hours that turned out to be.
Over a period of time?
It probably took about 10 weeks.
Oh, that's great.
But you were right there at the concept. I mean, you started their application, whereas a lot of this work has
Been done already.
We can lift.
Well, exactly. So that's why I had no trouble sending you that application, because the minute it went live, it was public information.
Right.
So I would start with that, learn what mistakes were made in that application, what questions didn't elicit the responses where I thought I was clear, but apparently not. Then I would rework that for yours. So rather than pay for the entire process of developing an application, which might have been like 6 hours, it'll probably take an hour to rework it for you.
And
Do you know how many businesses and nonprofits were granted in East Windsor?
117.
And how does that compare for us, Cheryl, in terms, I mean, I know there's big businesses, small businesses, mom and pop businesses, seasonal?
Well, that's where you start to draw a line right in the first sentence. You say what the definition of a small business is. In this case, it was 25. Under the federal rules, it could be as large as 200.
Yeah.
Classifies as a small business.
Employees.
Yeah.
Employees, yeah.
Not revenue.
So, but the town can make that as, you might say, we really want to help the smallest businesses in town. So no more than 10 employees.
Well, the majority of our businesses in town are home-based businesses, consultants working out of their home, that sort of thing. One employee,
Yeah.
self-employed.
George, can I just follow up on one thing? You said 117 grants. Was every application, did every application receive some funding?
Some were not qualified.
Oh.
Some were not businesses. They were not.
But everyone who qualified received some,
Yes.
up to 10,000. Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Except for those who simply did not qualify because of residency issues
Right.
or lawsuits against the town. If someone has a lawsuit against the town, that makes them ineligible for a grant from the town.
Does that make them ineligible under the final rule? Well, under the
No.
Or it was East Windsor.
No, both towns.
Okay.
So here's a question. If somebody is in arrears to the town for taxes, do you require this money go? If they get a grant, that it go to pay the taxes? Both towns felt no. Because the point is you're trying to revive the business.
Right.
And the tax collectors are good. They know who has what assets. If they have to go get their money, and it tends to be a very small percentage. But it depends on the town's feeling. I mean, that's one of the things I said in my answer. The sensitivities of the town can't be replicated by me, even though I live in Eastern Connecticut. I've lived here my whole life. I'm not from Old Lyme, so I don't know the little businesses.
But I did like the fact that at the state level, when you had them on the application form, and I started to cobble one together, and I gleaned a lot from your form and 3 other forms that I happened to look at, that you said at the state level, if you're a business, you need to be in good standing with the Secretary of State, and if you're a nonprofit, you need to 501c3, and you'll need to demonstrate those things.
But then some businesses don't have to register with the Secretary of State.
Right, the 909s.
So they show a 909, that kind of.
Yeah, but I did the same thing. I did include that. I did that for the state.
Yes.
George, what is your experience with dealing with associations? So we have a lot of groups in town that one would consider private associations, but they were shut down because of COVID. They couldn't have their meetings. They couldn't meet in public. They lost people paying them dues.
What are they registered at?
Beach associations, let's say.
Thank you. That's exactly.
So is that
Is it a
nonprofit?
501c3?
Possibly.
It should.
We don't know.
I don't know that for sure.
So there are a number of designations under the 901C. 1, 2, 3, 4, they're all nonprofits of a certain status. A church, a religious nonprofit, the Congregationalist Church.
Sure.
They're not a C3, they're a C something else. So the Beach Association, they might be one of those designations that makes them a nonprofit. And again, as a political person, when you're dealing with private associations, I would make sure that they don't discriminate against anyone. You know, we've got our neighboring state, Rhode Island, is very similar to Connecticut, yet their United States senator is explaining why he belongs to a beach association that doesn't allow people of color.
Right.
You know, so if you're doling out money and the world is watching you.
These are like homeowners associations.
Yeah, so that's, now, are there some that are in conflict though with the town?
Oh, yes.
And they have a lawsuit pending?
That I don't know.
Well, but see, that would be.
There's one in particular
a
that
deciding.
contacted me that doesn't have a lawsuit against the town that I'm aware of, but often open their facility to the town to use, but they survive by dues on visitors or people that live in their community by the beach. They were shut down. They need tremendous amount of upkeep at this point, and they would like to apply. So I'm just asking these questions with them. And
so I would invite, in a situation like that, I would invite everyone to apply to start with. And then you look at, and this is where, you know, there's the 80-20 rule. You spend 80% of your time.
Yes.
So the last 20% will be questions like that. Like, okay, so what is your designation? You're a C2, that qualifies you as a nonprofit.
Right.
So what happened to your association? So you say you couldn't have meetings and you would have derived income from those meetings, but you couldn't have that meeting. You would have had this big dinner that you have every year, but you couldn't do that, and then
that's probably a prime
do this and do that. All of those funds,
right.
Just like a nonprofit that could not have a fundraiser that they have every year,
exactly,
they would be entitled to the funds that they normally would have, provided that they're a nonprofit. Right. You know, I mean, or a business, but they have to be something.
Right. And they have to. I think the yardstick is if they can't do it under the nonprofit clause or the small business clause, whatever limitations we put on, they have to demonstrate something.
And
we need to set the floor, whatever that is.
To be very honest, all good news is delivered by the committee, and all bad news is delivered by me.
Question there?
If you've gotten into causality, these funds are supposed to be to help offset the impact of the pandemic. We've got these beach communities with long-standing wastewater, flooding, and sewer issues, where sewer is going into Long Island Sound. This way predates the pandemic, but the beach associations would really want to get a piece of the ARPA money to help defray the costs of mitigation on the Sound. We're trying to get a legal opinion on that, which we'll talk about later. But I'm wondering if you've run into the whole infrastructure eligibility causality set of issues, and how tightly tied does the request have to be to the pandemic?
I don't believe in an issue with an infrastructure question being dealt with by the municipality that the causality is as strict as it is with a nonprofit. So, for instance, the town of East Windsor is spending part of their COVID money extending a water line to buildings that don't have adequate fire protection, sprinkler systems. So the town is spending money to do that. That is not terribly different than, in this case, it's an emergency environmental issue. It affects shellfish beds, and I know because I used to administer that program for the Department of Agriculture, and the state would be very interested in that. So the state could put in ARPA funds to fix that. The town could put in ARPA funds if there was another entity dealing with that area a health district, they could dedicate ARPA funds, and perhaps, 3 or 4 entities each pitch in to help a problem like that. That's what I would think is having worked for USDA and had to broker between many areas who had funding. We fixed a big problem in Massachusetts because I got the state government to put in $10 million, and then I got the USDA to put in $10 million, and then some group that was within EPA put in $10 million, and then the problem was solved. No one entity could do it. So, that would be an approach I would suggest, and that would involve your state legislators, it would involve the first selectman, it would involve you got to get a bunch of people around the table and say, what are we going to do? We got to do something. We can't have all this money come through here and nothing goes towards fixing this problem that's festering, is going to get worse. During the last hurricane, when I was at USDA, at the State Department of Agriculture, after the beach had been terribly eroded, we went through and you could see every place that was illegally putting nutrients into Long Island Sound. And you could tell right away because the owners were out there with shovels trying to cover it up. but literally, there are so many places.
Well, there's a history of that.
And it hurts the Sound. I mean, it hurts the community. This is a total aside. When I got out of my car, I live inland. I live on the Connecticut River, but not on the river, but near the river. And when I got out of my car on this clear day, I could smell salt air.
Yeah.
That is something that I don't want to say you take it for granted here, but you don't notice it probably every day.
Oh.
So that's the community you have. It's about Long Island Sound and taking care of it. So you could, I think, very easily make a case that ARPA funds by the municipality can be expended for something like that. And I'm not an attorney. I'm not now, nor have I ever been an attorney. But reading the language, I think anyone with environmental experience with the town would be able to read that language and find justification. But I'm not an expert on that. I know more about the grant and that part of it. Just that you have to read the whole document. So I remember phrases and things I read that were outside of my area.
Any other questions for George?
I have another question, just going back to the grant levels, piggybacking off of either Martha or Jen's earlier question. If let's say we choose $500,000 for a grant total, is it our prerogative to have one max amount for small businesses and another max amount for first responders, essential worker or direct response during? Can we choose to do that?
I believe you have a great deal of latitude in setting up a program however you would like to set it up.
Okay.
When you talked about first responders, in my questionnaire now, I have a question about premium pay. So there was a trucking concern that in order to stay in business had to pay their truck drivers an additional $10 an hour. That was a premium pay. So they were entitled, not for the first part of their salary, but that additional 10 goes towards that. So you could do that. You could treat first responders through the nonprofit section of this grant.
Right.
I would recommend that you not change any levels of funding, because that just invites the question. Why is someone funded at less of a level?
Well, I'm not as important.
And that's just you could do whatever you want.
Right.
I spent my life in politics. I'm advising you not to do that because there are so many places where people can become jealous or hurt or have their feelings hurt that are important members of the community. I mean, there are stories of individuals that rose to heroic proportions. One woman kept a laundromat open in a not so nice section, open 24/7 for no other reason than she felt that people at the lowest end of the spectrum who are out in the face of this deserve the dignity of clean clothes. And she just losing money. She just kept going in as soon as somebody left the machine, she was spraying it down. She kept the restrooms open for people and routinely had all the material in the restroom stolen by people who had nothing. You know, stealing toilet paper, imagine, right? So that's where you are. But she just kept taking the money out of her pocket and doing it. When this program came out, it was a godsend to her. And that money then went into cleaning the whole place, putting in a new floor, a new sign outside. So the strip mall that she was in, she made the place look better with her new sign. So these are the type, and then there are all these, there's an economic term that when you a multiplier effect that goes on with this money. So right now, I don't know the legality of this, but the first selectman in Colchester has touted a plan to give everyone in the town a gift card worth, I think, $100 that can only be spent on businesses in the town. Now, that's a really interesting idea. I don't know about the mechanics of having a list of eligible businesses and cards and how much it costs to make cards and distribute them and how, I don't know how that would work.
And how to limit it.
But it's a pretty interesting concept about making the money revolve around your town.
It's a great idea. So other than the way we were kind of, at least I was kind of envisioning, we would see programs, we would be funding programs, which we could still do. We also can look at people's experience during the pandemic and offer them a grant to compensate them up to an X number figure without a specific program that they're going to use it for.
I believe you could find language that would enable you to do that, but that process, I believe, would be very fraught.
Well, okay, then I misunderstood what you were talking, for example, this lady with the laundry.
She applied as a business.
Yeah.
And
got her $10,000.
But she didn't tell you what she was specifically going to spend that money.
She did. So that's not my part of this.
Right.
That's the contract with the town. After I handle the awards, and I need that information for a report so that you could see this is what we put in and this is what came out. But that information would be contained in the contract that the individual would sign. They would say, I took this money and I put in all new lighting.
The final grant report.
So you basically...
Final grant report. So at the end of this process, I write that document that you see, you can see online from East Windsor, that explains every part of the process, how the town arrived at doing what they were doing, all the 117 stories, and the total amount, and then in a visual presentation with graphs, pie charts and such, you show how much went to minority-owned businesses, how much went to various sectors within your economy, and that's how that was dealt with. If you were to say you wished to do a program to, beautify the town, where you, like the town of Fairfield, not using ARPA funds, but the town of Fairfield in a beautification project pays half the cost of a dogwood tree for anyone in the town that wants to plant a dogwood tree. So Fairfield is known as the dogwood capital of Connecticut, you know? Something, right? I mean, you've got Roger Tory Peterson, so, you know, I mean, towns do that. And you could fund a program for that purpose and give everyone, I imagine almost any creative idea that will benefit the community, you could find rationale within ARPA. The municipality can. They have a wider charge than, say, a business does. You know?
But what about then the follow-up? I mean, that's the part. So you get this grant application, the town authorizes, signs whatever necessary documents. Then what happens after? What is your thought is going to happen? What is East Windsor going to do to follow up to make sure that money is spent as appropriate?
The person signed the contract saying that's how they were going to spend it, and unless someone calls attention or questions that, there's not going to be any.
They've made a promise, and they've alleviated the town of East Windsor from its
Basically a whole lot.
But I also...
They were vetted.
If I also think, going to your question, person comes in, fills out the application, meets the, let's say, $10,000 threshold easily because of what they lost and so on and so forth. Town says, okay, we're going to give them the $10,000. They come in, they sign a contract with us. Unless I'm not hearing this right, once they sign that money, their attestation to that document is, I really did have that loss. It really occurred. It really occurred in these areas. But now that I have the $10,000, I'm going to put a new floor in, I'm going to put a new sign in, and I'm going to upgrade 3 of my washers, in the case of your example.
But they don't actually have to do it. There's no compelling language. Once they get their information, their money, they can do whatever they want.
Okay, so now they can do whatever they want with the money, and all the town does at this point is says to you, I need my report. 17% went to minority businesses, 31% went to...
But it's helpful to learn what they did with it.
Right.
So
but some may choose to do it, to use it for debt reduction. I'm going to pay off my credit card.
They could
Fungible. The money's fungible.
Money's fungible.
Right,
Yeah.
Once it's out,
but for the presentation of what the effect of this award was,
The justification.
you'd like to get an idea of what they spent
where it
on.
actually went.
Right, so even if somebody then, after they told you they were going to put in lights, all of a sudden decided to use it for the water pump, what difference does it really make? You know, I mean, it helps.
I don't know.
Okay, stop. Nicole is our Director of Finance.
I think it makes a big difference. I'm Nicole, the finance director.
Hello, Nicole.
When I report this, I'm gonna have to sign something and my auditor is gonna come in and audit this. And if it's a subrecipient of the grant, I'm required to monitor that subrecipient. We give money to LYSD, we used to in a grant, it used to come through us. Well, I was required to make sure that they're spending their money, you know, I'd be on the hook for that, not them, me, because I'm the one that's going to be audited. And so to say I can just give money out to someone who then doesn't, I don't see an invoice for a floor, I don't think it's every auditing.
It may, except that I believe, and I'm not an attorney, but I believe the part of the requirement is the damages part, not what was then, the money was then spent on, because there isn't a link between the damages. And money is fungible. They took all the money out of their personal savings account, the college tuition plan, and now that's where that $10,000 is going. And I'm going to tell the town it's going there, but I don't really have to under the law.
So take a case where, like, the ambulance association wants to get a stretcher, and they say, well, we did a lot more stuff, but we did get reimbursed for all of that through insurance. So we really didn't have a loss, but we want money for a stretcher.
So someone is going to sign an affidavit saying they had damages. If they don't have damages, they're not gonna get the money for the stretcher.
You're attesting.
But once they get right.
They could under the governmental service.
I believe so, but that's not my area of expertise.
But they're
But I
attesting.
believe, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I understand your concern very much. I'm not, minimizing it, but I believe that would be an appropriate question to be answered by your town attorney as to what your requirements are. Now, so that may be resolved by not putting the question in the contract. You don't even ask them what they're going to spend it for. So how could you possibly be on the hook for that?
See, that's where I'm headed. From the logic here, it's telling me I'm attesting to the fact that I had this loss.
Mm-hmm. That's the critical part.
Right, and
to
that
satisfy the law.
loss nets me, whatever, $10,000. Once I've said that, the town, that's what I'm hearing. I'm not saying that's what it is.
But you guys are looking at it, we're forgetting Nicole's piece.
No, I'm not. I understand.
No, not at all.
She has to, for 5 years, keep this stuff. Every year she has to report on at least where the money went. Is the project done? Is the project 50% done? She has to report that, so we have to have some minimal relationship.
I don't believe that's true for them.
Our end of the project.
Just our
No,
end.
it just, yes. that's
No,
the-
just what we're giving out, not about.
But the town's part has to respond.
But what this sounds like is, what she's reporting on is, yes, they showed us that they lost $10,000,
Right.
and we've now reimbursed it.
We reimburse them, we're done.
That's it.
And again, for the interest of time, I don't want to minimize that concern because it's a legitimate concern. I absolutely agree. However, it is beyond what we are here as a committee to make our decisions based on. We could perhaps say, given our concern about ongoing reporting, we may have a goal to limit the total number of grants made.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Nicole, maybe you could call the finance director in East Windsor and get their take on their reporting for those types of grants. Because they've evidently come up with something that they feel is
And the gentleman
satisfactory.
in Somers is Mike DiMaccio. He's the finance director I'm working with there right now and is all over this program.
In Summers.
In Somers.
And the name in East Windsor is, okay.
And I think,
On the
George,
website.
The guy in East Windsor.
I think, George, your point is, when this is all said and done, there's going to be many millions of grants that have been handed out, and we want to act in goodwill. We want to act ethically and legally with legal guidance. However, how in the hell are untold millions of these things going to be audited?
At $10,000 apiece. I mean,
It's virtually impossible.
So-
Again, that's not saying towns should have carte blanche to do whatever the hell they want. That's what I'm proposing.
My experience with the federal government would be that there will be some process. They will pick X number of large cities, X number of small towns, X number of medium-sized towns. They'll just pick them out of a hat. They'll then say, okay, we're going to look at your program on this.
Show me
Here's your documentation.
How did you hand this money out?
And in this case, when I finish, there's a written report, and then there are 3 ring binders that have every application, every justification, my notes as to how I arrived at the amount. That is then followed up by a vote of a legitimate committee of the town accepting it. You're going to have a document where people swore that they told you the truth. I believe an auditor looks at this and picks 5 of the grants out, looks at them and says,
I'm certainly not.
I'm done here.
I just not beyond my
But so,
expertise, but-
and from the town's perspective, the finance department, there are many reporting requirements. I don't believe, and this is a question to be answered by an attorney, that what we're talking about here goes for the 5-year look at whether the lights were put in, rather than did they really have the loss that they then got the money for.
But if we approve,
Something in the contract that says the town can request any supporting documentation. Because if I have someone stop me outside of the sidewalk that somebody got 10,000 for a floor and they put on, you know, a new car with it. I have the answer to that, so I'm just saying.
The answer would be, unfortunately, that the law provides for that to happen. But I know in the contract.
What I'm saying it's so public that.
So I am going to forward to the committee, I guess to Martha, the contract that was used in East Windsor, which does require that the individual keep the records for 5 years. That satisfied the town attorney who wrote that contract. So whatever the town's sensitivities are to that, we would respect the contract.
Right. And I think that,
again, my final thing, that's why it's important to have a whole bunch of people around the table, each with an area of expertise that says, what about this? And you solve every one of these before you ever go live. And then afterwards, I guarantee you, we will scratch our heads again about what we're going to do with this one.
Yeah.
George, that's the process.
If a town were to engage you, how much time would you need from notice to being able to start getting an application together and having an application?
I believe it would take you probably a good 3 or 4 weeks internally to come up with an application. You've got one to start with, I would say, and you've played with it. So then when you're done with it, send it back to me, and we'll go back and forth, and then the application's ready, but then there's a lot of other things. So there needs to be an outreach program. People in town have to be aware of this process. So there's a lot of pieces. But I would say you could probably have wheels up in 4 or 5 weeks.
Question?
And then a month to get applications in, and then a month to make the final award. But you could probably do it with a 3-month, whole soup to nuts, 3-month, 3.5 months, depending on how many applications.
Sure. That's about what we have left.
Yeah. But it is what it is, you know what I mean?
Okay, perfect.
So you've been very generous with your time.
This has been so worthwhile, Martha.
Yes. Martha, thank you very much.
Dennis, do you have any other questions?
Nope.
Okay.
And so I will
send me that contract?
I will forward a contract to you.
Okay.
And then, you can engage internally, the tax collector, the assessor, get everybody around chatting about it. I would imagine it's important to engage the first selectman at some point.
That'd be nice.
But, however, I have no other business obligation other than Somers right now.
Okay.
So, if you are...
And where are they in their application process?
It went live yesterday.
Okay.
They've received 20 applications. I've gone through 13 of them.
In one day?
I went, cursory. I haven't written the whole thing up, but I started. What I do is go through their application and create a tally sheet with the application attached to it, and I start following up, see where I got to the 10,000. When I get to 10, I move on. After everyone agrees, so I would imagine I'm going to request that we have a meeting in a few weeks and that we sit down at the table and start clearing people.
Yep.
Then I can start writing things as other applications are coming in so that by the time their application period ends on the 31st, I should probably have a good 60% of all the work done.
Now, do you when you do this process as part of your, I'll call it your triage, if you see a one that doesn't qualify, you just pull that out of the mix?
I pull it out, but then when I get to the subcommittee meeting, I'm going to point it out.
3 here.
This is what I've got.
Three disqualified, what do we do?
So say there's 100.
Yep.
I would try to get together and review with the subcommittee maybe 33. So we do it just 3 times, not forever and forever.
Okay.
And then we go through that process, and then the subcommittee would direct me to follow up on these, ask this question. I don't like the rationale for that. Is there another way we can get to that number?
Right.
All those things to satisfy everyone on the committee so that everyone has had an opportunity to be certain their concerns were addressed. And then the town can decide to issue all the checks at once, which I think is better, or you could start issuing them as they process it, but then there's somebody waiting for a check and wondering where
they got
it
their
is.
check in 10 days?
Right, so, you know, and these are the things that you have to be very mindful of to keep the public support. And then at the end of it, the town is extraordinarily proud of what the town did.
Do you meet with every applicant yourself?
Only the troublesome ones. And if there is someone that is unable to fill out an application, I would certainly, that the town extends
That's a huge point.
my services to the applicant to help them draw up an
That's a huge
application.
point.
Yeah.
They just don't have the capacity for whatever.
Yeah, they don't have a computer.
And many won't.
Yeah.
Well, some won't.
They have some difficulty with the language, and they're inhibited, and it's better if I sit down with them and go over it, you know, over a cup of coffee type of thing. You want all the townspeople to be happy. This is going to sound self-serving, but I want to commend all of you on this process. This is the most thorough process I've seen in a town for deciding how they will spend these funds.
Well, thanks. That's good feedback.
I think having the survey provides a wonderful foundation for your decisions. I know and this isn't a criticism, but in East Windsor, it was the first selectman who said, this is what I think we should do. And then the Board of Selectmen okayed it, and the Board of Finance agreed with that approach, and that was how it was decided, that half the money was going for here, and something's going for a pipeline, and then we're going to put 2 roofs on the schools, and bada bing, bada boom, there's our $2 million, move on.
Let's have lunch.
So this has been a much more exhaustive process that you've gone through, and I think it will have a lot of benefits for the town, because there's not going to be a lot of unhappy people. Everyone's going to feel like they had their chance to dance. So.
But you did bring up some good points. Sending all the checks at once, you know, fixing the amount so that nobody. I mean, there's some pieces of the skill set that you.
And I'm not going to just. One of the questions was, do I like to work in a collaborative fashion? I would be open for phone calls, discussions. As soon as a problem arises or a question comes up, we just deal with it. And, you know, I'm extraordinarily accessible is what I'm saying.
Oh, that's great.
I'll come back to town as often as you need me.
Be careful what you look for you will surely find it.
Well, I know, but I feel strongly about helping these businesses and these programs.
I think everybody here does as well.
I'm personally offended, frankly, that the government thought that they could shut down people's businesses this way and then looked for the legality to do it afterward.
Yeah.
And now they're faced with having to repair the damage, and maybe the damage didn't need to be so severe.
Mm-hmm. And maybe they've gotten more buy-in.
Monday morning quarterbacking is always easy.
It's always
easy. We hadn't had a pandemic for a while. So.
Do you want a copy of this? Because this
I would. Thank you.
I thought I sent that to you. I didn't.
Well, that's updated a little bit. I put a little.
You sent me an earlier version.
Yeah, I put a little header on it, and I'd be glad to go back and forth with whatever that turns into.
So you folks, you have a lot to chat about. I would ask that you, at the end of this meeting, designate one person to talk to me.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to have to copy 8 people on everything all the time. So, but I'll do whatever you ask me to do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much, and it was so nice to meet you.
Take our phone line with you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Are we down to Martha? Anything from Councilman Cleary?
No. I sent all of our further questions to Michael and Jack, and I said, I know this is a lengthy list, so could you get it to me as soon as possible? And that was, last week right after. They'll muddle through it.
I would just like to add to that. I really recommend everybody, I'm sure you have already, but go through the final rule again and again. On the 3rd or 4th time, it really speaks to a lot of these nuanced issues, particularly with the infrastructure. I feel I have a little better layman's understanding of what they were trying to convey with it. It does speak to a lot of these nuanced issues. So I would recommend everybody just read that final rule.
Do you remember the date of that by any chance?
April.
If you do final rule, Google final rule, it's going to come up.
Yep, and there are there's really three, but I only have two, and there's two really salient pages in there. And that is this little graph which talks about the reporting requirements. And then there's another page, and it's early on, I think it's page 6, talks about the criteria for the application. And I think Rick's right. Go through it, read it again, have a third cup of coffee, and go through it just one more time. And it does speak to a lot of how this is structured.
My thinking has evolved as I've read this several more times, just to put that out there.
I agree. It's the same thing happened to me, especially with the infrastructure piece, like Rick was saying. The necessary infrastructure, that's important to...
Because the final rule does address some of the, ambiguity of the interim rule. And they go through line by line specifically what they're trying to
accomplish,
to clarify.
The overarching piece.
Under Dave's item, do we, as a committee, want to talk about having a subcommittee for the application? I mean, Dave's all over this.
Well, are we going to talk about
George?
George?
Yeah.
Because I have a couple questions that I just thought, like, the process that he was talking about in East Windsor seemed like it was pretty much providing $10,000 to businesses who could prove that they suffered business loss. But we have a lot of other ideas here besides just that,
absolutely.
right? And so
Yeah.
what portion of the 2.1 are we going to put towards that? Because, on our survey, where did that fall? Like, as, payments to,
So for everyone's reminder again, it's also worth to look at what the classifications, the qualifications are So I'm going to read them.
Okay.
There are 4 broad categories, and it's always, I go back to this like every 3 days. Respond to the pandemic and its negative health and economic impacts. Number 1, very broad. Clearly businesses, clearly nonprofits, and probably other things could fit in there. Number 2, provide bonus pay to essential workers. Well, one thing that was brought up today that I had not really considered is I was thinking essential workers were frontline emergency workers. However, that could very well be a business hiring people to do something additional that I wasn't really thinking of that.
Mm-hmm.
They also considered grocery store workers.
Grocery store workers, yeah.
Absolutely.
First responders and essential.
Right, there is. And so that's number 2. Number 3, prevent, I think this is important because it's very broad, prevent cuts in public services caused by pandemic-induced revenue losses and avoid additional cuts. Again, what doesn't fall under that, right? Because the town runs on tax revenues.
Right.
We could narrow that down clearly, but I could certainly see how, the washing machine for the fire department could fit under that, if we were to decide that it would fall under that versus the municipality discretionary account. And then the 4th one is invest in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. So I think the time has come for the committee to say, all right, we need to make a determination broadly. Are we going to say 25% to each of these categories and then fill our survey items under each of these categories? We could do that. We could simply say 25%, and if bucket A didn't have enough applicants to spend 25%, it gets reproportioned. I thought his point about thought his point about whoever applies, you want to try to get them approved was a pretty interesting point. And if we were to take the broad approach of categories and then put people under their categories, we could just simply say, $250,000 per category, or $500,000 per category, whatever we wanted to do. And his administrative expense was frankly far less than I would have expected. He doesn't handle everything, but he does, in my mind, from being a former underwriter, in my mind, he provides a very valuable value proposition, and being able to document and go out and create a case file for every single one of the ones that this committee is going to perhaps recommend to the board.
And I think also the impartiality of having an outsider.
That too.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And he was right. He plays the bad guy. I do that with my clients, kids, all the time.
But I think the good news is, and my takeaway from just this discussion on those two fronts were, the application goes out, the applicant comes in, the applicant figures it out, we have a ceiling amount for each application, and and this is the important part at the end, when they attest that was their loss, the town's obligation is not completely done, but it's 90% done at that point.
Well, they certainly have more of a leg to stand on than, I think they will have more of a leg
How did you give them the money? Here's the process.
Well, documenting what we've done in this committee and then cobbling it together with a product similar to what he's described certainly is a better leg to stand on than I think East Windsor has.
Yeah.
So I came to a similar conclusion. The process he described was way more objective than what I was thinking. I was thinking we were going to have to do a lot of
triaging,
or a lot of establishing criteria and weighing.
A lot of nuance.
Yeah, and he described something way more objective that I think.
But he does only address certain segment. There's the other. I don't know. Maybe you call it the other 3/4 that we have to.
Right.
So I think it would be great if the application could be a universal application. And if it does, exactly.
Yeah.
I agree.
Right.
And if it doesn't apply to your application, you just simply don't submit it. So as Phil has been doing, a universal application I think would be great.
Everybody applies, we see it all. It's my vision, if you will, is we open and close the door on that with that one application, with one attestation, with one set of documents. Sign off.
But are you going to put on the nonprofit business side $10,000 limit?
Yeah, well, that was why initially my thought for that was, on the municipal side, we would cap the nonprofit and business sector side or individual side, however that works out, at so much per applicant, and then the rest would be in the municipal side. And then if we needed more money and wanted to put more money in that, we would have access to it to do that. Or we would spend it all on the outflow, or whatever we decide to do with it.
So I'm sorry, go ahead, Barry.
$10,000, I mean, are you?
Oh, I'm not married to that number.
No, I'm not married to any number.
But in that scenario, that seems to me just to be like.
That seems too low to me.
It's just to be distributing to businesses and nonprofits that can show that they've been, that they had revenue loss. You've got the Ambulance Association that has a $40,000 stretcher that they want to buy. Times three.
Right.
And so I don't understand how you could have a cookie cutter limit to every application.
Right, I agree.
And some applications may be much broader than just repairing harm that caused. They might want to do something new for the community.
Well, that's the idea. But those two, the categories that he was dealing with, what they did was a $10,000 ceiling. We can do whatever we want, one.
Right.
And two, as long as and this is where I kind of parted company here a little bit, is if they can demonstrate the loss, the fact that they want to do something else with the money once they get it, as long as, I don't even believe, and I've only read this like 3 times, I don't believe that the government will have any problem as long as they attested to the fact that they had that loss. And we made them whole. They chose to do something else with it after it was whole, not go to the casino necessarily, but do something else. And I also think, to Nicole's point, we should, and I was going to put that in anyway, and I actually put it in the revised application, that we reserve the right to ask for more information. If there are any questions, Nicole or someone or whoever's on this committee can go see Mr. Jones and say, gee whiz, do you have the information that says that you did this stuff? And if they did something else, I put it all on 7 at the casino.
But what if you've got an organization that had no loss, that's applying to do something to help the community recover?
That's it, but it's, I think the net is large enough to capture it.
So to address that, perhaps, we could, from an equity standpoint, we could say, we're going to allot equal amounts to each of these broad categories, right? And then the committee could still retain discretion as far as what the award to each of the applicants are, if that's what the committee decides.
Or we could go out without any caps or anything and see what comes in, and say we'll set the caps after we see what the demand is.
Not a bad idea.
That's not a bad idea, because then you test your
That's what I asked
ceiling.
last week, like,
Not a bad idea.
would the applications inform the amounts more than?
Great idea.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that's a better way to test the ceiling.
I have one more other question. My takeaway was that the applicant absolutely had to prove either loss of revenue or extra expenses, so I don't.
If you were a business or a nonprofit.
Right, that's what I'm referring to, right?
Yeah, that's why I say keep the application for just nonprofits and businesses and not make it universal.
Well, no, I think the town has the right to know what you spend money on.
Right, but that could be a different process.
No, I think it should be the same process.
So if we want an upgraded website, we get to fill out the same application the business does? Or
If you want to use this money, yes. You fill out the.
Ken, what
the harm of
what do
it?
you think would be materially different in what you're envisioning?
I'll think about that. I think it's just, we don't have to prove that we were.
No, no, but all I'm saying is, it's a clear way just to show it. We may spend, of the money we get, we'd say we put $10,000 caps on the other, 9 or 10 buckets. And the two municipal ones, we spend $110,000 on those two. There's going to be somebody who's going to say, wow, the town took $110,000, that money. But we should have an obligation to be transparent enough to say, we provided internet at White Sands, we provided internet at Haynes Park, we did this, we did that, we did this, we did that. So, I think that's fair. I think we should be proud of what we do.
I think the information, the compliance information that we talked about the last meeting and Nicole sent out shows if we spend over $50,000 on something, you have to attach contracts to it.
Right, well, we would certainly do that. We would do that anyway.
I would attach it to everything.
Yeah,
That'll be the documentation.
Right, I would say
Saying to the town employees,
Like Wi-Fi.
what if 6 different departments all wanted money? We're gonna have to go through like a vetting process, just like, don't we decide as a town what we?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I would think the town would make that request.
The town would make that request.
Right, but
Under the town.
but you're saying every town department, like Bill puts in something, I put in something, Nicole has a.
I disagree with that, because my feeling is, and we said this, I don't think you were here, we did a survey to see what the town thought the best, most needs were. And I don't think, me personally, I can't speak for the town, I don't feel comfortable saying, well, the upgrade of the website is more important than 50 sessions for child and mental health. I think people assume that we're going to use that survey and allocate it.
Right, but government services were number 5. Government services, though, were the fifth highest, agree or strongly agree. So I think that the town has spoken and said, we do want you to allocate some portions to government services, because we maybe heretofore didn't realize how much government services were valuable to us. So I would think that the town would come to us if they so desired and said,
I don't see a huge issue with that.
no, I would expect
If I want something for my, let's just say I want something
there
for
shouldn't
my.
be 5 or 6 different applications.
Yeah, for my sandbox,
Yeah,
You know,
it's one entity.
If I want something, that's, I mean, if you're applying as a municipality, you're implying under that entity.
Yeah.
And we can coordinate, she does it every year with the budget. She does it every year with a budget, and we can coordinate what we're looking for and come up with sort of an order of magnitude.
Nicole, maybe what you were referencing though, which I tend to agree with you, is maybe what you're, maybe, I don't know, you know what you're thinking. What I was thinking after our meeting and after Nicole had sent that message out, which I thought was thought-provoking.
It was.
I think that the point of carving out $1 million and letting town have complete discretion, and then the committee having recommendations on the remaining, I think that's different than what I am talking about. I am still thinking that the committee should look globally at these funds, allocate everything, a specific amount, probably equal to the 4 broad categories, and then we collect the applications, and the town could be one of the applicants for that.
Yes.
Yeah, but I guess I'm just thinking too, like, so does anyone ever ask the building department what their needs are? Does anyone ask the assessor's office what their needs are? Does anyone ask?
That's the town's responsibility.
That's the entity.
That's just send an email around.
That's the town's responsibility.
That's part of the outreach.
And very good. It's part of the
That's
outreach.
right.
And we need that banner across Halls Road. Seriously, I mean, outreach is
You have to
tough.
book that 2 years in advance.
I mean, we need that banner across the road, so I think an outreach committee is,
Yeah, outreach is important because I told you.
It'll be huge.
I'm involved in entities that applied in East Lyme, and I stumbled across your website a week before the deadline.
Yeah.
Didn't do any outreach to.
Right, and I think we could do a better job of that, and I don't know how you feel about, meaning George here, but I think he brought up a lot of good points for us, more than I expected. You know, he was much more valuable than I had
I think we should
anticipated.
go back to Rick's point. Do we form a subcommittee? And do we make a recommendation that we're going to use a consultant or not use a consultant? Because we got to move forward.
We got to move fast.
Yeah.
We got to move.
I also was favorably impressed. I thought he really did a good job of explaining things and putting them sequentially. And he even suggested a timeline, which I don't think we actually have yet. So
I make a motion that the committee issue a letter of intent with George to move forward with the development of our application process in conjunction with the subcommittee on the application process.
I'll second the motion, I'll work with him.
Okay, now discussion.
Discussion, yeah.
No, you seconded, so now
Oh,
we
do we
can
have
have
the
discussion.
authority to enter into a contract with George without
Yes.
selectmen approval?
But I think that in the
Yeah, but-
contracting with George,
We can't pay them, but we have the authority to enter, we do.
No, we have the authority to refer it to the Board of Selectmen, that they enter into a letter of intent. We have no authorization to sign contracts.
I think we've
I'll
got,
sign anything you want.
we have a time,
I'm only kidding. All right.
What is it, Dennis?
Sorry.
I think in our contracting with George, we need to impress upon him the timeline. He talked about time, but we're in March, April, May. I don't know when our cutoff is, but we're done in June. Is listening to George and looking at our experience with Rivercog, I mean, we blew through months and months with Rivercog. Got nothing.
Yeah.
Here we have an experienced resource who's articulate, motivated.
Yeah, available.
And has history and is
We
available.
don't have the luxury to talk about this for another few weeks. We've got to do it.
You have a Board of Selectmen meeting on Monday as well, and you will not have another one until April. There can always be called a separate
So
session.
we have a $1,500 approved expenditure budget by the town?
Yeah, Nicole gave us that in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, right?
Well, we were doing
I think it was 5.
For the survey.
Like it.
I said I could find anything to cover this.
Yeah.
So, but if Selectmen has a meeting next week, they would want to see a contract and approve a contract.
Well,
So
that's
we
why
can
I'm
have
pushing
that.
back on this. I mean,
Yeah.
do we have an approval to spend for administrative I thought we had approval to spend for administrative expenses.
Well, we spent money on the survey.
Yep.
Is there anything left?
Is there any left?
I mean, if
I have
his
to give
total
you
cost is $25,000 to the town of East Windsor, I can't imagine it's going to be more than $1,000 for.
And a contract for George is gonna have to be approved and signs, approved, I think, by the Board of Selectmen, but Tim is the one really that signs contracts.
Right, we vote to approve, then Tim signs. Sometimes all three of us sign, but it depends on what it is.
So.
It's on Monday, we need to move quickly.
How can we frame this special meeting? How can we frame this?
Just a letter.
How about a letter of intent signed by the first selectman to engage those services? I'm just saying, would that satisfy the requirement?
If it's under, what is it, under 20, we don't have to go to Board of Finance. If it's 19,999, we're good. If it's over 20, it has to go to Board of Finance.
We have to get approval by Board.
Board of Finance, yes.
So why don't we just do like
But this is coming out of ARPA funds, so it's not like.
Yeah, so why don't we do a letter of intent for $5,000 to engage the services to have him do that thing and get it going and work with the subcommittee? Why don't we do that?
I retract my motion.
Can we do that?
I retract my motion, and I think it needs to be replaced by a replacement motion.
Yeah, I think we author a letter of intent to engage his services for an amount not to exceed $5,000. Can't do that.
Why 5,000?
Why are you
Just do the
We're just
application.
talking about the application.
Let's say it's $125 an hour.
Yeah.
He has been at the gates for 3 months now.
Right, I'm just saying, don't say 5,000 because.
But just to get to the application, just to get the
Oh, he's saying,
application
where are you headed?
Well, I mean, are you going to have him reviewing? Why are we gonna go through these steps twice?
Right.
Let's just say, we're gonna
You may-
engage
well-
$125.
All right, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to be the skunk at the picnic, but I think the $5,000 number is, let's see what he does with the application. If all the magic works, we do enter a second time and get the balance of $19,000, $20,000.
Well, if we don't like what he did, then we spend
Then we're done.
dollars on him?
Then we're done.
We don't have to spend $5,000.
No,
It's whatever.
Up to, amount not to
We
exceed.
want to hire him.
He
Make a
said-
motion to hire him.
That's it, let's.
All right?
Okay, all right.
Make a motion to hire the consultant, George. Last name, I can't remember. Thank you.
At so amount.
That amount of $125 an hour to provide application and other related
To
services
be approved by the Board of
be
Selectmen.
approved by the Board of
He's
Selectmen.
got to buy into our timeline saying, and all the deliverables have to be done by X date.
With a deliverable date not later than.
He's gonna give us a contract. Is that?
Yeah, he's gonna write,
Contract needs to
he's
be
gonna write a
negotiated.
contract.
Yeah,
So the motion is to enter into a contract with the consultant.
right.
Second.
Okay, Nicole?
Okay, discussion?
Is this an expense that has to go to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, town meeting?
I was wondering the same
It
thing.
It's going to be less than 20,000.
It doesn't have to, it's under 20,000, so it doesn't have to go to, if it goes under 19,999, as Board of Finance, Dave Kelsey pointed out last night, they do not have to approve it.
Right, so what I'm saying is, if they approve an additional appropriation of 19,000 or whatever it is, I mean, I gotta give you an account to put that to, it doesn't just,
It would be ARPA.
but if it's ARPA money,
Then, in this case,
Wasn't the legal decision that it has to go through?
ARPA administration, I think.
ARPA administration is a viable,
She's asking, does it have to go to town meeting?
I don't,
We haven't heard yet.
Yeah, but
from the
doesn't,
lawyer.
Leslie has to go to
no,
town meeting, and that's
town
under
meeting,
20,000.
yes, but there's a difference between, I would say, and I'll check with Jack, that the administration part of it is a little different
what-
than, it's not like we're giving George $20,000 to go out and, have a party with this, or do a facade on a building. This is to help us move this process forward. So,
and I get all that, I'm just saying, the 1,500, I haven't taken that out of ARPA money, I haven't reduced that account, that fund at all. I've put it under Selectmen's Office miscellaneous, or anywhere else that it would fit. I think I put some of the annual subscriptions to the thing, under my thing. Because I don't know for sure what the process is for any of these. We have
Yeah.
that.
Clarification.
And so just because it's maybe covered under ARPA, we don't know that, and I'm not taking any money out of that until we know that.
Yeah.
But you can still go through I would still go through the process of.
right, and then we
Not writing the check yet.
And then we can figure out how we get through it. We do have a town meeting coming up as well,
Yeah.
and that could also be added to that list.
Nicole, real quick, would the and I'm gonna ask this question because you'll know why I'm asking it. If we took a chunk of that money and said that's specifically for administration and implementation of the application process for the ARPA fund, put a period at the end of that sentence, and say it was $3,000, $4,000, or $5,000, whatever the number was, and then we know he said his total rate was like 25, was like 25,000.
They said about 25,000.
So now, then we would go back and say, we need the other $18,000 for application review and that kind of stuff. That's how I was looking at it, as two separate functions.
No, just hire him.
Well, I'm saying we just hire him, but we use that. You know where I'm headed with that? You have one block, but you can't do that. They're the same function?
No, like the way, I can't say that.
Help me. I'm just trying to think.
She's looking for.
Okay.
No, it's just like if you're gonna do a project and the project costs
$80,000.
$80,000, let's say $100,000.
Yeah.
You can't split it up into pieces to try to get it up there so you don't have to bail.
So you can't say, no, I know that.
That's the thing, that you're talking about circumventing the budget process.
Right.
Not necessarily, but I see how you get there.
You're not the finance director.
I know.
So
But I'm
I'm
thinking,
thinking what my auditors will look
okay,
at.
yeah.
And they look.
All right.
I don't live in this world.
Paul,
so-
does the selectmen budget have enough to entertain this person for $125 for a while? And then we,
Apply 19,999,
okay,
additional appropriation to selectmen miscellaneous.
okay.
And move
Put
it.
it under there for now, it could be reimbursement
Right.
later, and
Yeah.
go through all the steps.
Yeah.
to do that.
Okay, that was kind of what I was going to ask, can we get reimbursed later? once we figure
Now,
out- Okay, yes,
I have one other thing
thank you.
that George is used to working in a grant environment where he's approving or getting up to $10,000 with a number of different applicants. And it's very possible that our process is going to look different. We might be looking to approve a mental health program or stretchers, so he has to be comfortable working in a different paradigm than what he has been. So I just want to make sure that that is,
Are we asking him to do those, or only asking him to do the small business and nonprofits?
Well, that's all
well,
he
if they're
will do.
501c3s,
Yeah, that's all he will do.
That's true.
LYSP is a 501c3, the ambulance association, the fire department.
You didn't say he wouldn't, you just made the
He
recommendation.
said, I will sit with you and discuss your
Discuss it.
parameters.
And that's,
But the difference I see in that, Cheryl, is you're proving the loss. So LYSP can say, we lost money because we couldn't hold a fundraiser. We give them $10,000, they do what they want with it, as opposed to I'm being proactive and making a program to address the needs of the mental health of the human.
Which is fine,
Right.
and allowable,
Right.
and perfectly allowable.
What I'm saying is he's only been doing the first.
And not the
I'm not
second.
necessarily interested in reimbursing LYSP $10,000. I might want instead for them to have a really,
So,
I think,
I agree. I think we're talking two different scenarios.
Yeah.
That's where I'm getting confused because, mental health, I envision we're going to do something about mental health that's going to cost more than $10,000.
I agree.
LYSP could oversee that would involve many community partners.
Absolutely.
Does that fit into this process?
No.
I don't think so.
No,
Doesn't it go in that other chunk that's not-for-profit?
I think,
small business?
Yeah.
I think he got
By
the
the way,
word from
you
his
could
people.
apply that way if you wanted, a nonprofit could apply that way if you wanted, but again, no, he's only doing that narrow sliver of,
Okay.
And that was their
Official.
directive
So
from
then-
their board of selectmen.
right, and that was it, that's right. He said his board is,
I feel like that is a small part of the
Yeah.
overall.
it might be, and if it's a small part, it still is gonna be a small part, but we don't want anybody here being saddled with having to document all of
Yeah,
that.
still
Then it's gonna come back on us.
so basically, I'm going to just summarize this. If you have an application, it has two parts. If George is going to handle the nonprofit and small business, and the other side is more governmental services or other type of thing, then basically George is going to approve the small business nonprofits. We are then going to have this other
You got it.
large group. And we are going to prioritize those
based on the survey.
based on the survey,
Okay.
and submit those to the Board of Selectmen saying, this is what we think.
And we're not gonna ask them to prove.
It's my vision.
That's my understanding.
That's my vision.
Yep.
It's been my vision all along.
Yep,
Okay.
I agree.
I don't think my question's being understood.
I did not hear from him that he says, he didn't create the 10,000, I don't understand.
No, here's the question. Can he operate, and I like him, I'm not saying I don't, can he operate in a way where he is assessing applications that are not about a set limit and a lot? Can he assess, a nonprofit
those
coming
parameters.
to him, but can he do it?
Are we asking him to do it?
We will have, well, let's.
So the only thing we're asking him to do is small business and like a nonprofit who is maybe, I don't know, Lions Club.
Perfect example is
Children's
Lions Club.
Center.
Right, okay.
Why don't we have Martha go back to him
Revenue loss
with
only.
it, I asked him how he would approach, get that feedback to us, a program, because that was barely touched with him. We'd like to see how he would work with a programmatic grant application. Let us.
Well, I think that will come into the contract negotiation.
Other bucket?
He's not going to
He's
do
not
that.
going to
He
do
said
that.
he
That's
doesn't
in
want to do
the
that.
other
Wait, hang on,
bucket.
there's too many voices at one time. So you're saying he's not
My
going to do
understanding,
that?
he doesn't look at the bucket of he only looked at small business.
Right,
And so.
Right.
And that, in that bucket, you have to show loss of revenue.
Correct.
What you do with the money is up to you. You
Right,
can say
right.
you're doing this,
Yeah.
and then 2 months later you decide, no, I'm not doing that. It doesn't.
Exactly.
And
So-
that's my
So
understanding.
he's gonna take care of those two sandboxes.
I understand that. Can he take care of programs?
I think that's a larger question.
What do you mean by
But don't
program?
call it's
A
not.
mental health program?
Well, but that's not what
And
he
that's
did.
not what he's going to do.
He's not-
That's us.
That's the.
That's,
Okay.
we have to do that.
So, I think part of the confusion is the word nonprofit, because when we say small businesses and nonprofits, you're thinking nonprofit programs. I think if you think of a nonprofit who has suffered revenue loss, like.
Like the
any other
Lions Club.
small
That's
business.
the thing.
So
Exactly.
I think it should be called the nonprofit and small business revenue loss application.
It could be,
Great.
that part of it could be it.
You know, because when we brought up the stretchers, he said, well, that's a nonprofit, so that would come under here, and we would find the.
Yes, but they don't have to apply that way though, Cheryl.
Correct.
They can also apply under the
Okay.
remaining.
Right, so we will still have a large amount of work to do, even when he takes.
Oh, yes, oh, yes.
I'm sorry. I still think that the $10,000 cap has to be on the small business nonprofit.
Revenue loss?
Revenue loss, that has to be there. That's him. He handles that.
Right.
If a nonprofit wants to come to us because they want to develop a program, a nonprofit wants an ambulance stretcher, if a nonprofit needs a washer and a dryer
Yeah.
for the fire department, that is a totally different thing, and it comes under other. It can be.
Comes from the town.
It comes from the town portion of the other, because I think he's totally correct in saying, you do not want to start saying, oh, well, you're getting 13,000 and you're getting 9,000.
don't wanna do that.
We're
You're
going to
better
have
than.
unhappy people regardless, so that, we can't even worry about.
I think that's.
I think
a good
it's
number.
But you can reduce it.
Good at this point.
If we have two processes, then we've got the small business nonprofit revenue loss application with George, and then we've got the programs, or whatever you would call it. Is that another application process?
No, I still think you use the same application. You just.
But who manages it and who assesses it?
I know,
We
I
do.
know, but- and
Our
Nicole
committee
still
does.
has
We
a
have a
problem.
subcommittee that manages that. I mean,
Okay.
unfortunately,
We either hire a consultant or manage it ourselves. That's where we
we
are.
have sought to find somebody to be the one-stop shop.
Yeah.
Rivercog has failed. This person only does a certain amount.
Right.
We're gonna
And
spend more time on what if.
he could spend more time
Churning.
finding something to do.
Churning, yeah.
Right.
So look, we're going to have to take this on. The bigger parts, we're going to have to take on.
If we want to go into a contract with him to do the revenue loss portion, then there's still a huge amount of work to be done that we don't have guidance on.
Right,
Exactly.
but you know what?
But we're gonna be able to work right off his hotel.
Mary,
We get an
we can do this. Let's do this.
Yeah.
All right.
But that's always been the case. I mean,
Yeah.
please,
I know,
if somebody
but-
knows another consultant who will do everything, please
How
bring
many
them to
times
the
in your
table.
life have
But
you looked for that
also,
consultant?
before this meeting, we weren't even
Okay,
talking
let's-
about revenue loss.
Right.
But he made it clear, I never understood that all along, whether that was a criteria.
And we didn't know about it really how this came out until the final rule. I mean, we saw it, but now that it's been sort of framed in the final rule, you kind of, Okay, if you can make it connect.
They started this before the final.
Oh, yeah.
We are gonna take our 2.1 as the standard allowance. We don't have to prove.
Right, that's correct.
How we make that
Structure it,
clear. Yeah, we're asking you to prove revenue loss for these XYZ programs,
Right.
but you programs, we don't.
We don't have to do
I
that.
can't come to ARPC and say, I own Benchmark Wealth Management, and I want $50,000 because I own a business. That's useless to ARPC, right? That's useless. If I came here and said, I'm requesting $50,000, which I'm not going to be, because I had to hire an IT consultant, I had to buy new computer systems, I had to upgrade my broadband. Okay, that maybe we decide that all makes sense to us as a committee, and we don't need to hire anybody to do that. Okay, well that's an option. My view is if we can leverage off of somebody who's going to be able to handle the more intricate businesses that come to us, maybe we only get 5 businesses that apply. And then we get a real, defendable file on that. We can use his expertise with creating the application. I would love for this person to be able to do everything for us, but Mary, you said you have an idea.
No, I don't really have an idea. I'm just saying that this seems very narrow to me. And so, I think it's nice that we're contracted with him and he can take care of this one little part. Then we've been telling people all along, we're going to have an application process. Just wait. And so the ambulance, for example, wouldn't fit into that.
Yes, they are. They're going to be on the other part. It's going to say other.
Yeah.
It's not going to fit into.
He's not assessing it.
No.
He's not going to assess it.
No, he's not assessing.
We're not.
I know, but he's not assessing it. How many times can I say
I said that. So Mary.
In other words, he gets
It's process.
this small profit revenue loss, that's all he gets. Everything else comes to the committee. And whatever we decide to do with that, whether we decide to do it ourselves.
LISB says I need $100,000 for a mental health program. Show us show them what the parameters are, the proposals are.
Right.
It's clearly defendable under ARPA. We agree or we don't agree.
Right.
Right.
And that goes to the selectmen and they go,
We
yes,
have the
no.
same application or a similar application to gather all the
Yeah,
data.
all the data.
And process as best we can.
And all of it fits, and
And
if it gets audited.
I do think that George can help us create
I'm
the same
going with that.
application, understanding that there is a dividing line.
Yeah.
Now, the committee may decide we're only going to put X dollars under this bucket that George does. I wish we would get to that point soon. So that we all know what we're working towards.
We're paralysis by analysis.
Putting $100,000 towards that. Well, whatever.
I don't think that's fair. I think we're having a very valuable.
Well, we're having a very valuable discussion, but the candle's burning.
Paralyzed?
No,
Let's not talk like that.
I know. Maybe
No, I don't think we're paralyzed.
All right,
No, I think,
we have a motion on the floor.
I second the motion.
I wasn't sure who
What was the
made it.
motion?
The motion was to hire.
the motion was to enter a letter of intent.
No.
To hire
Oh, okay.
George
Crivada. Crivda. Got it.
But to recommend to the Board of Selectmen that we enter into a contract with George Crivada.
Right.
Basic services in the nonprofit application process and the small business application.
Why don't we add
Way to amend that?
I was going to say, can we modify that to say revenue loss?
Yeah.
Oh, and also increase expenditures. So you can show, if you didn't lose revenue, but you had to add,
He's outside of that.
Nope, he's outside of that. He falls outside of that. He just does,
He said that, I think I know what she's saying. She's saying you either lost money because you couldn't have a fundraiser, you had to spend extra money.
He absolutely.
revenue loss or.
Patio guy, right?
Economic
Increase.
impact of COVID.
Economic impact of COVID.
So what's the final wording?
Suzanne, you want to try to read that one back to us?
The committee recommends to the Board of Selectmen that we enter into a contract with George Crivada to assist in the application process. What? Okay.
In the development of an application process.
isn't it serve as a consultant?
And assess revenue loss and expenses incurred by the economic impact.
I'm not sure I like the word assist.
I would want to put that all in the box, which is kind of restricting itself to stuff besides the resident loss applications.
Wasn't the motion like just hire the consultant?
Hire any consultant, pick a consultant.
We hire a consultant. Does it need to be more complicated than that?
Yeah, to do what, by when?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this whole has to dovetail with May or June.
Okay, so
And he was talking about 6 or 8 weeks to sort of get organized.
He
And
said
we
it-
don't have 6 or 8 weeks.
He said soup to nuts, I think
he said he could do the application for us in almost an hour once we just give him our
Right, 'cause he's
parameters.
already got one.
Right, so let's just, so I'm thinking, Dennis, if he can have 2 weeks, if he can have an application to us in 2 weeks, and then we outreach for,
Right?
I think, two to 3 weeks.
2 or 3 weeks.
I mean, once we get the application out, as soon as it's ready, it goes. And then we just have to start outreaching like crazy, and we'll each take a part of town and run like rampant. And do what we have to do. Make the phone calls, tell them it's out there.
And are we going to use the outreach to define what the caps are going to be?
I think and we can talk about that next week.
Yep, next week we have to.
We gotta put our
identify
parameters
where-
together.
What bucket goes where, and
Yep.
George is responsible for what percentage or whatever the committee decides.
So
So it's 2 weeks, and then about 6 weeks, and we're done.
4 weeks for him to analyze, for the applications to be open, he said 4 weeks.
Yep.
And then he'd probably need another week or two to wrap it up and get us a final report.
But for the
Right.
purposes of this committee, we just recommend to the Board of Selectmen that we hire the consultant, and then the contract gets hammered out with the details and the timeline.
Which, what I would ask George to do is to put together that contract. I can send it, I'm sure he could have it to me in a matter of days.
Yep.
We put it together, we look at it first before it goes. It doesn't have to go before the selectmen until Monday. So as long as I have copies to provide that you all agree, and if we have to vote on it over an email vote, we'll vote via email.
I feel like there needs to be a precursor motion to the consultant, something like we're going to create a standalone economic recovery grant process for small businesses and town nonprofits. And that's kind of the umbrella, and for that standalone economic recovery grant process, we would like to hire a consultant to write the application.
But I think we should say that in the motion. Those are the 2 categories that he's going to cover. That's it.
I wouldn't even pigeonhole.
Yeah.
What did you say, Nicole?
I wouldn't pigeonhole it.
Yeah, I don't-
If
Yeah.
you wanted him to do an application for the other stuff, then
Maybe-
on that, you don't want to be pigeonholed based on this motion.
Yeah, it's like, do you want to hire the consultant, or do you not want to hire the consultant?
Right, and I think
1, 0.
And if we find out we don't,
he might be more versatile than we
we don't
think.
give him any more hours.
Right. And he also might be more versatile than we think.
He's way at will.
So something like we'd like to hire consultant, George, for application development, support, and review process.
Yep,
The
period at the,
ARPA committee.
for the ARPA committee. Period at the end of the sentence.
Could you repeat that?
Uh-huh, sure. The ARPA committee recommends to the Board of Selectmen that we hire George
Krivda.
to provide application development and support to the ARPA, application development review and support to the ARPA committee.
Application development, review, and support.
Yep,
And
we're done.
The other way to do this is say, we're not talking about hiring him. George, this is a request for proposal from you to deliver X, Y, and Z over this time frame. He comes in with a proposal.
But if we've got the
We have
limit
a
of
meeting, then we hire him.
Yeah, the problem is we don't get it approved on Monday by the Board of Selectmen.
We're still dead in the water.
Yeah,
They don't meet again until April.
they don't meet again until April, and that,
Still approve to hire and then came out contract.
yeah.
hammer out
We
the,
can hammer that out, and the contract is deliverable.
yeah.
Well, can we get an approval to hire based on a response to an RFP that he'll give us within the next week?
It's Monday night, isn't it?
I would rather engage his services and then terminate his contract because it doesn't do what we want it to do.
It's,
Absolutely.
look,
You know?
you're not signing a contract yet. You're just saying to the board, we want to hire him. They'll say, yes, okay, you can. then we
That's what I
can
want.
hammer out the contract.
Get over that hurdle.
And then Tim can sign it. He knows that the rate will,
No, yep, I agree with you, and just dovetails, because then the selectmen can approve going into business with them, however you want to say it. And then we can also say, but we also need additional appropriation of 19 grand, and that can go to the Board of Finance next Tuesday, because we're not sure if we're going to get this all approved by town and all that, but at least we have money in the selectmen's office budget.
Yeah.
We don't have to go.
yep.
That's the best way to
And I
go.
will get with you on account and stuff like that before you're meeting about it.
Okay.
Right, perfect.
Then we can start paying.
And then, but I think to your point, we don't want to sign an agreement that doesn't lock him into the window that we're tied to.
Right.
And contract process.
Maybe we add to the end of it, per approval of a contract.
Right.
And we need to call him today and say, we want a
Oh, that's
proposal
not-
for you to do the work.
Yeah.
That's not a problem.
And we've got to have a Board of Selectmen meeting, but, because he can start thinking about, he knows we did the survey, he knows what we're asking for, and it's up to him.
He can preload the gun if he wants.
Yeah, let him earn his feet, it's part of what you do if you're a consultant.
Okay.
All right, so that's the motion.
No idea what it is.
Second?
No idea.
Can you read it one more time? It's probably been approved 16 times.
Okay. Well, the committee recommends the Board of Selectmen enter into a contract with George Development to assist with developing an application, review of applications, and submitting reports. All right?
Application process?
I second.
Any discussion?
Any more discussion? All in
No,
favor?
didn't have the final verbiage for it.
Call for a vote, quick.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody abstain?
Or opposed?
Okay, motion carries.
I have an appointment with a resident, I gotta.
Do we have a legal opinion yet?
No, I said that. I started in on that really quick, but no update on the legal opinion, only that right now they're feeling as far as the money, it goes from Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, whatever. And if I go to one more meeting where somebody says, oh, let's just pay for this with ARPA.
I know.
It's like a MasterCard with an unlimited number. Meeting's over.
Should have gone like that.
All right, can we
Till next
adjourn?
Wednesday.
Yes, motion to adjourn?
Motion is
Second.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained?